Yo, what is up? It is your boy Zither, back with a brand new What If. As you can see from the title, this is going to be What If Deku was Miles Morales. If you guys want to see the second part to this, it'll actually be out about 10 minutes as soon as I drop this, to be honest. It's going to be a collab with my boy Izukage. We've actually been working on this for a little bit now, and I hope you guys enjoyed this enough to go check out the second part on his channel. But that being said, his link is going to be down below in the description, as well as the link of the second part. It'll be out as soon as this video is out, so you guys won't have to worry at all for the second part of this. And that being said, let's go ahead and
get started.
So boys, this whole story is actually going to start when Deku's at the quirk doctor. Now Deku will actually just be at the quirk doctor, just like wondering what his quirk is. Like, oh man, I can't wait to get my quirk. As the quirk doctor then tells him, sorry kid, not gonna happen. Look, from the charts here, you know, he does that little thing that he did in canon, telling him that he's just never gonna get a quirk. Now Deku would return back to school the very next day and basically tell everybody that he's quirkless. This is when everybody would begin to laugh at him, and this is when Katsumi, yes, Bakugo's gonna be gender bended in this one, is actually gonna walk up to him, and she begins to tell him that it's fine, like she'll still be his friend, like it doesn't matter whether he has a quirk or not. As Deku smiles, and then she begins to look at everybody else and flash her explosions as she then says, and you guys better leave him alone or else you'll have to deal with me. As all the kids silence, and she's like, huh, as she walks away, and Deku just walks off with her. Now for the next 3 years, since Deku will actually be 4 at this point, Deku will actually just be hanging out with Katsumi, and him and her will actually grow to be some really close friends. Him and Katsumi will actually always have really been friends, and in this version Katsumi will have never gotten that superiority complex that she had gotten in the original canon. This time it would have been nothing at all. She would have no certain little like thing or feels like she's entitled to the best, like to being number one. She would actually want to be an amazing hero and want to be the number one, but she's not going to go about it in the way that Bakugo did, meaning she's not going to be taking part of any bullying. And in terms of the two other kids with the wings and with the long fingers, they would actually just go find another kid who thinks he's all that, and that would be that. And Deku's life would actually be kind of normal, with Katsumi basically protecting him all this time, always like making sure that Deku's fine, and Deku would actually really be extremely thankful for this. I mean, without her, he'd probably get picked on every day, and Katsumi would actually, she'd actually, say that it's no problem. She cares for Deku. I mean, because deep down, she'll actually like him. Yup. I mean, what else am I going to gender bend her for? Come on now, it's obviously going to be the ship. Now, this is when Deku would actually be going on a little bit of a field trip to a very high-tech place. It's going to be Oscorp Industries. Now, this is when they would be going on a field trip. Deku would be 7 years old at this point. He and Katsumi would just be wandering around. They would actually be looking at all of the spiders, when out of nowhere, Deku just feels something crawl on his neck as he then gets a little bite or like a little sting. And he's like, ah! And he slaps his neck, killing the spider instantly. The spider would fall down his shirt as it's dead basically, and it would just stay there. Now this is when Deku would arrive home, and he would basically say that he feels a little weird, and his mom would give him a little bit of medicine and tell him to just sleep it off. He might be better the next day, and if he's not, then she'll make sure to take him to the doctor. As Deku would tell her, thank you mom, as he would basically go to sleep, and he'd wake up the very next day. Now when he wakes up, he would basically just go to do what he always does. He would go to brush his teeth, but when he tries to squeeze the toothpaste out of the toothpaste holder, it would basically shoot out onto the window, just like in Spider-Man, the original movie. And this is when Spider-Man. Sorry. This is when Deku would be like, huh? As he's like, what's going on? As he then tries to turn on the faucet as, no, I'm not gonna do it. No, yeah. He turns on the faucet and he actually breaks it in his hand. He's like, what? And then he's like, he slips and he hits the sink, breaking it. As he's like, what's going on? As his mom comes in and she's like, hey, Izuku, are you? As she sees everything and she gets mad, and Deku's like, I'm sorry, mom. I can't control my strength. And she's like, Izuku, you might have gotten your quirk. As Deku's like, I have a quirk. As they immediately rush Deku to the quirk doctor. As as they would basically just call the maintenance guy, and he would come down to fix the sink real quick, to stop the leaking from happening, and Deku and Inko would immediately be rushing to the quirk doctor. This time, it would actually be a different doctor, not Dr. Ujiko, and this is when Deku would actually be told that his quirk is called a spider. His quirk is called spider something. Spiders. What's Spider-Man's powers even? His quirk is called Spider. Literally Spider. Just like what Spider-Man, because yep, he's gonna be in this. Now, this is when the doctor would say, "Incredible. You seem to have Spider-Man's abilities and the pro hero of America and then some." As Deku would ask who that is, as the doctor would say, "Oh, don't worry, you'll be meeting him very soon." As he would proceed to tell Deku and Inko to just go home and to come back at the same time, that they're actually gonna have a surprise for Deku. As Deku's like, "Really?" As he goes home knowing that he has a quirk now, and when the very next day comes around, Deku would go straight to the quirk doctor as he would see pro hero Spider-Man in there. He's not exactly the number 1 hero, but he is like the number 4 hero. No, he's the number 2 hero. He's the only hero that I'm gonna be adding into the world from Marvel. So yeah, for those of you who I'm also gonna be adding a couple Spider-Man villains, just a couple, just a little bit. And this is when Spider-Man will actually be like, "Hey, young man," as Deku's like, You're Spider-Man. I looked everywhere about you last night ever since I found out we had the same quirk." And he begins to mutter. He says, "Oh my God, it's Spider-Man." As Spider-Man just starts chuckling and he takes off his mask, revealing what he looks like. As Deku's like, "Whoa!" And Spider-Man's just like, "Hey." So, as he would tell Deku that he's actually going to be training him and telling him how to use his powers for the future so he doesn't misuse the power. And tells him that with great power comes great responsibility. And Izuku asks him who had told him that. He basically proceeds to tell him that his uncle. As Deku's like, "Your uncle must be a really cool guy." As, Parker would proceed to be like, "He was." Izuku would be like, "Great." As Spider-Man would proceed to walk up to Inko, and he would basically ask her if she'd be okay with moving to New York for a couple of years for Izuku to train in his quirk and become the best hero he could be. He would proceed to tell her, she would be a little bit like, and then Parker would proceed to tell her that all moving and all expenses will be paid for. "I promise you guys will be situated in a nice home, and I will take good care of your son." As she's like, "You said nice home?" As Spider-Man is just like, "Yeah, I mean, you'd have like a really nice big house, a 2-story at least." As Inko would be like, "Where do I sign? Run me them papers. Hurry up, boy." As Spider-Man would begin to just laugh, as Deku's not really sure of what's going on, but he's just happy to know that he gets to meet Spider-Man. Now about a week would go by, and this is when Deku would begin to pack, as he asks his mom, "Mom, where are we going?" And she begins to tell him that they're moving to New York, and Deku's like, "New York? Isn't that where Spider-Man does his hero work?" And she says, "Yep, we're going there for you to train with him. You're gonna be training with him for the next couple years." As Deku's like, "Awesome! I get to train with the number 2 hero." As she basically just starts laughing, and she's like, "Yeah, my little Izuku trained by number 2 hero Spider-Man. I can't believe it." As Deku and Spider-Man would proceed to basically train for the next 10 years. For the next 10 years, Spider-Man would have ended up training Deku and honing his abilities. Now, I'm just going to say it. During the 10 years, Deku would have definitely, at first, had a little bit of fear with having to, live up to Spider-Man. I mean, that's not an easy feat to accomplish. I mean, he has to live up to an amazing hero who, he's great. As Deku would have to have a couple years of working by the side of pro hero Spider-Man. He'd be trained by him every day, and Spider-Man at the end would have actually ended up gifting Deku a suit. Now, the suit that Spider-Man ended up giving him would be a black Spider-Man suit, just like the one that Miles Morales has, except it wouldn't be spray painted, and it would actually have a little bit of more extra technology when it comes to the actual tech of the suit. It would be able to go invisible with him because, as we all know, he would have all of the original Spider-Man powers, as well as camouflage, the electricity explosion that he can bust off of himself, electricity webs, regeneration. We already know about her spider sense, and amazing super strength. His super strength would be way beyond what Peter's is, and he would actually have about 50% of One For All strength if I had to compare it to something in the My Hero world, as well as immortality. I know you guys may be wondering, immortality? What? He's too broken. As well, the reasoning for this is going to be actually that Miles Morales is basically immortal. The spider that had bit him actually had some properties on it that was basically designed to elongate life, but combined with the powers of the Spider-Man thing, it basically made him borderline immortal. He's not invincible. He's basically just really hard to kill. And he has some very fast, speeded up regeneration. So yeah, that's basically how this is going to go down. Now, after Spider-Man would give him the suit, Deku would actually thank him. During the couple of years that Deku was actually training with Spider-Man, he would have done a little bit of hero work on the side with the last year that he was training with him. For the 9 years, he would actually have a little hard time since, he's a kid. He would basically barely start getting a hang of things at around the age of 8, when Spider-Man would basically have trained him how to fight in terms of combat. And during the age of 12 is when he finally would have started to get the hang of most of his abilities. He would have a hang of all of his baseline Spider-Man abilities, but in terms of the rest, it would have taken him about 5 years to master all of them at will, and really have them all down packed. Since Spider-Man can't really train him in those, since that's not what he trained in. He would just be there and stick around for Deku, as Deku trained with him every day of his life. It'd be kind of like a father and son relationship, since in this version, Hisashi actually, left Inko and Deku when they were young, since I kind of hate the fact that Hisashi's his dad, but he's never around, so screw that guy. Anyways, this is when Deku would actually, kind of look at Spider-Man like his father, a little bit like a big brother / father role, He would basically think to himself that he's going to try to live up to Spider-Man, as Peter Parker would proceed to tell him that he shouldn't live up to him. He should be even better. He should strive to be a better version of him. As Deku would basically have a little bit of that Miles Morales personality, as well as, confidence that comes along with being Spider-Man and being trained by the literal Spider-Man, as well as taking down a couple of villains in the Spider-Man world. Deku would have actually helped take down Dr. Octopus and the Rhino and characters such like that. Deku would have been a great help and an asset in terms of helping Spider-Man. He'd actually be very well known in America, but in Japan, not a lot of people would know him. A couple people that definitely know who he is, including some heroes, and knowing that Deku's basically going to be the Spider-Man of Japan as soon as he comes back, because some heroes are actually waiting for him to come back. And let's just say that Spider-Man basically offered to give Deku a full pass to UA, as he would have basically given him like a scholarship? No. Recommendation, but Deku decided that he's not going to take it. He wants to get in just like everybody else on his own merit. As Spider-Man can respect that, and the ideals of Spider-Man would definitely be instilled on Deku, as he thinks that with great power comes great responsibility. He'd definitely be more confident than Spider-Man is in terms of fighting, and definitely have that smart mouth that Spider-Man has when he's fighting. Something that he would have just picked up on the side. I mean, you stay around Spider-Man long enough, you definitely pick that up. Now, this is when Deku would basically be told by Peter Parker that he's going to be moving back to where he used to live, and Deku would thank Peter for everything that he had ever done for him. I mean, he trained him, he kept him fed, he kept him in amazing housing, and he trained him how to become an amazing hero just like him. Spider-Man would basically, or Peter Parker would basically tell him that he's not going to be a hero for much longer. I mean, he has a good 10 to 20 more years left in him, but he would have like another 10 years left in him, because he'd be around, because Spider-Man when he met Deku would be around, like, let's say 26, be 26, and then he would have spent the next 10 years training him, and then he'd be 36, and then on top of that, he's only going to have like another 10 years left. Yeah, he's only going to have like another 10 years left. So Peter Parker would proceed to tell him that he wants him to inherit the Spider-Man name. He wants him to become an even better Spider-Man that he could ever be. As Izuku would basically have a glimmer in his eyes, he tells him that he's going to live up to him and that he's going to make him proud. As Spider-Man says, no doubt you will. As he basically gives him like four different suits, and would give him give the family a decent sum of money for all of the troubles that he thinks he caused, because he made the move, and Inko would be like, no, it's completely fine, like, thank you for everything, as he would just insist and give them a little bit of money, a little extra cash on the side, give him a little million. Spider-Man's rich, by the way, and I'm just gonna throw that out there. He is packing cash. But anyways, this is when Deku would basically go back. Deku would actually arrive the very same day that of the sludge villain. Yep. And as Deku was basically just walking back home with his mom, he would have basically decided he would actually arrive to his house. His old house is no. He would live in a different neighborhood, a nicer neighborhood, as Deku would actually have like a little bit of a nicer house in this version. Now, Deku would actually be running by the grocery store trying to get something, just walking by, when suddenly out of nowhere he hears an explosion. Now, this is when Deku would basically run there as fast as he can, and as soon as he sees that there's somebody trapped inside of a sludge villain, he'd be wondering how that happened. Now, in this version, All Might would have actually ended up catching the sludge villain, but he would have actually ended up accidentally dropping him, where Bakugo, or Katsumi in this version, since yes, gender bend, she would have gotten caught, and Deku would immediately see that it's a girl inside there. Now, as soon as he sees that, he would look around to see if there's any heroes around, because he's not a pro hero yet, and he doesn't even have his license, so he can't exactly interfere legally, at least. And this is when Deku would notice that the heroes aren't doing anything. He would just immediately just be like, fuck it, as he just jumps in there and web sligs in there. As a couple of people are like, Spider, as they look at him and they're like, that's not. As Deku jumps in there and shoots an electricity web straight at the sludge villain, electrifying it, as Deku would turn invisible and grab Katsumi out of there, immediately pulling her out with nothing but his pure strength, as the sludge villain's like, where are you? And he basically tries to lunge at Deku, but Deku would throw Katsumi away as far as he can, as Deku would proceed to basically look at the sludge villain as he says, hey. And he basically ends up shocking it, basically sending it to oblivion. Now, this is when All Might would the heroes would basically begin to capture the sludge villain, as they all begin to gather around Izuku, as they ask him, hey, are you Spider-Man's did Spider-Man train you? As Deku's like, oh yeah, that's me. As they're all like, awesome. And the pro heroes are just like, dude, when you get old, like, definitely come to my agency. As Deku's like, yeah, definitely. As he's still a nice guy, he's not gonna sit there and just tell them no. And everybody begins to praise Katsumi as well for her amazing strength and willpower, and being able to hold on and long enough for Izuku to arrive. This is when she would actually be looking at Izuku, as Izuku has the green hair, and he basically looks like a cuter version of what she thinks he would have looked like. This is when Deku would basically walk off, as Katsumi actually ends up just pushing through the cloud, as she ends up rushing after Deku, as Deku's basically just walking home, and she basically grabs him and she jumps on him and she's like, Deku! As Deku hears that name, and Deku's just like, Katsumi? She's like, hey, how'd you not recognize me? As Deku's like, hey, it's been a while. As she smacks him on the head and tells him, where did you go? As Deku's like, oh, yeah, I was actually taken to America by Spider-Man. He actually ended up teaching me, how to become a hero with my quirk. As she tells him that, she had no idea, as she would have actually not been keeping up with him. She would know about the kid, but she would have never known that it was Deku. As Deku just tells her everything that he had been through, and she just is like, wow, that's amazing. As Deku just tells her that, yeah, as she says, well, you remember when we were kids and I used to have to defend you? I guess the roles were switched. As Deku begins to laugh and chuckle as he says, yeah, I guess so. Now, this is when Deku would look at Katsumi, as, they get a little close, and this is when All Might would turn around the corner saying, I am here, as he coughs up and he reforms into his Small Might form. And Katsumi and Deku are just like, who are you? As All Might's like, oh, I'm sorry. He's like, I'm, as he coughs and he's like, I'm All Might. As they're like, explain yourself. Now, this one, All Might would explain his situation to both Deku and Katsumi. He would explain everything, and this is when he would begin to ask Deku if he wants to inherit One For All, as he tells him that he's actually been looking for a successor. And Katsumi, hearing this, is just like, you can pass down your quirk? And she's like, Deku, there's no way you can't deny that. I mean, it's All Might. It's our favorite hero. As Deku just looks at her and he's like, yeah, but as she's like, come on, accept it. As Deku's like, I don't know. I'd have to think about it. As All Might's like, you know what? How about both of you take down my number and you actually both can meet me at Dagoma Beach. I'd be happy to train you both. As Deku's just like, okay. As Deku and Katsumi, Deku ends up taking, Katsumi to his house as she offers to help them unpack. Now, this one, Deku, Katsumi, and Inko would actually unpack, and Inko would basically notice that it's Katsumi, and she'd be like, hey, like, I haven't seen you in such a long time. And she's like, hey, Miss Midoriya. And she's like, I kind of missed Izuku. Kind of wish that he would have told me what happened. And she nudges Deku on the head, and she begins to laugh. Now, this is when all of them would begin to just, have a good time as they begin to unpack, and Deku ends up, walking Katsumi home. This is when he ends up swinging home back as fast as possible because he didn't want to be walking home at night and have to deal with villains. As Deku just arrives home at the normal time, and the very next day would arrive. This is when Deku would basically go with Katsumi to meet All Might back at the beach. And All Might would be there immediately telling them that they're actually going to be doing a little bit of training with him. As Deku and Katsumi would look at each other and be like, we're going to train with the #1 hero in Japan? And she's like, and Deku's just like, wow, that's pretty cool. As Katsumi's freaking out, and she's like, I guess this isn't that much of a crazy experience for you since you already had Spider-Man teaching you. As Deku begins to laugh and says, no, it's not like that. Sorry. It's just that, All Might, you're still my favorite hero, but, when you're getting trained by Spider-Man, it tends to, he tends to become your favorite hero. As All Might's like, I understand, young Midoriya. Now, this is when Deku and Katsumi would proceed to clean the beach for the next 2 months. 2 people. Deku has immense strength. She has a quirk. 2 months. It would take them about 2 months to clear out the beach. As this is when they would both get a little bit of extra muscle mass on them. And All Might would proceed to look at Deku as he says, so you young Midoriya, will you accept my quirk? As Deku just stays silent, it says, well, All Might, as much as I'd like to take your quirk, I don't think I could handle the pressure of being the successor of Spider-Man as well as All Might. I already have a lot on my shoulders dealing with having to, live up to Spider-Man. I wouldn't want to have to do that. And he would then begin to say, and I think Katsumi would actually love to inherit your quirk. I mean, look at the way that she's been, hyped up about it. As All Might looks at her, and she begins to, just smile as All Might's just like, very well, young Midoriya. And then he looks at Katsumi as he says, would you like to inherit One for All? And she begins to basically be like, of course I'll inherit it. As All Might's like, well, we better get to work. We only have 8 months left. As Deku, Katsumi, and Bakugo would begin to train for the next 8 months. Now, Deku's only real growth in terms of the 10th month will be in strength, since he'll actually already have mastered most of his other abilities. Before, if I had to compare him to One for All's strength, since Spider-Man is very, very strong, he would have been about 50% of the strength of One for All. But after the 10 months and the immense training that he put him through, because All Might knew that, if he trained under him, then he's going to go through rigorous, deadly training. And that he did, since he ended up getting about to 70% of One for All's base strength when he's in his normal form, going all out. And Katsumi would have actually ended up mastering 15% of One for All. As, I think that works pretty well. Now, this is when Deku and Katsumi would basically thank All Might for everything that he has done for them. He would tell them that they would begin to tell him that they're very thankful for everything, as All Might would begin to smile and tell them that he's very happy about it. Now, this is when Deku and Katsumi would proceed to walk up to the UA entrance exam. As they would walk in, Uraraka wouldn't actually end up bumping into Deku wouldn't actually end up bumping into Uraraka at all, as she wouldn't trip and he wouldn't trip, so there would really be no reason for them to meet. Now, this is when they would enter and take the exam. In terms of Deku, he would actually end up acing it, since Spider-Man didn't just instill nothing but brute strength. He would also tell him that he has to be smart in order to be a hero, as Deku will actually still have his normal brains and then some, because, Spider-Man is very smart. As Katsumi and he will both end up acing the test. Now, this is when they would arrive to the robot portion, and they're actually in the same place. This is when the gates get open, and they say, There's no countdowns in a real battle, as Deku says, I already knew that, as he swings out of there. And Katsumi says, oh no, you don't. She begins to use her explosions and fly out of there. Now, in terms of Katsumi, she would actually end up getting about 269 points, as Deku would actually end up getting, you ready for this? 420 points. Yes, I'm a man of culture. Now, Deku would end up getting about 420 robot points, as out of nowhere, the ground begins to shake. This is when Katsumi will actually be caught off guard, as the 0-pointer comes behind her, and Katsumi will actually barely dodge out of the way, as Deku and Katsumi basically look at the 0-pointer as they're like, yup, we're destroying this. Now, this is when Katsumi would basically fly in the air and begin to spin like a spiral, as she begins to say, howitzer! And Deku would proceed to sling himself onto there, going in for a very strong kick, as Deku and Katsumi go in. Deku goes in for the head and she goes in for the body, as they blow the 0-pointer to pieces, both together. And they end up getting no rescue points at all, since they didn't actually end up rescuing anybody. So in terms of their actual score, it will be 420 as well as 269, I believe it was that I said. Now, this is when they would both basically look at each other as they kind of smile and they go off. This is when Deku and Katsumi would basically just be chilling at home for the next weekend, as they basically get their letters to know whether or not they passed. Deku and Katsumi would both pass, being told that they actually broke All Might's record. They would both be like, no way, as they're like, that's awesome. Now, this is when they would basically go to class the very next day, as Iko would look at Izuku and tell him that she's proud of him. And Deku would smile and hug his mom before he leaves out the door and just swings over to school. Now, this is when Deku and Katsumi would basically both arrive at class together, as they both decide to actually sit down in the front. They both end up sitting down in the back, as they're basically just chilling, when all of a sudden Aizawa just basically wakes up and says, if you're here to make friends, I suggest you leave. And Aizawa and Katsumi and Deku were just like, well, he does have a point. As Aizawa then says, put these on and meet me outside. As Uraraka intercepts, she's like, what about orientation? As Aizawa says what he had done to canon, and this is when everybody would proceed to head out. Now, when they head out and they're in the changing rooms, Mineta would be trying to get a peek into the girls' locker room. Now, Deku, knowing that Katsumi's in there, would shoot a web straight at the hole, covering it up. As Mineta's just like, why would you do that? As Deku's just like, he shoots a web at Mineta's mouth, as he then says, pervert. This is when he would get changed, and all of the other guys in the room would begin to notice how ripped Deku is, asking him what he does, and Deku would be like, oh, I've worked out ever since I was about 5 years old. As they'd be like impressed. Since he was 7 years old. They'd all be impressed, and they would all report outside. This is when Deku would be thrown the ball by Aizawa, as he says, here, throw it. As Deku throws the ball, and he gets a very impressive 1,000, how much would 70%, I would say, he would end up getting 1,069 points. Yes, like I said, I'm a man of culture still. As, he gets 1,069 points, and Katsumi goes up, as she ends up getting, 896 meters. All of the other tests would basically go to canon, and in terms of the race, Deku would use his webs to swing himself over as fast as he can. And in terms of the grip strength, Deku would annihilate it, as well as Katsumi using One For All's full cowling to destroy the thing. Everybody would be impressed by both of them, and they would actually be top two, as Momo was second and Todoroki's third, and the rest of the order goes as you guys would basically imagine. Now, this is when Mineta would actually be told that he's gonna get kicked out, and Deku's like, I don't think that's fair. As Aizawa was like, well, Aizawa was like, nothing in this world is fair. As Mineta actually ends up getting kicked out of this series. Now, Deku's just like, well, whatever, he was a pervert anyways. As Mineta gets kicked out, there will be no more comedic relief, sadly. Effing chat, boys. Effing chat. Anyways, this is when Deku would proceed to basically just go home with Katsumi, as they would basically walk over to Katsumi's house. Now, when they would arrive, they would actually have a little bit of a dinner with Katsumi's family, as Deku would basically see Baku mom once again, as she's like, hey Zuko, I was told by Katsumi that you're back in town. She was very happy about it, as Deku just basically gets a little bright red, and she also gets bright red, as they basically begin to talk and tease Deku and Katsumi about, you know, their quote-unquote friendship, as he and her are just like, what? No, that's not how it is it? As they basically look at each other and they realize that they both have a thing for each other. I mean, it's inevitable. They both have a thing for each other. Now, this is when Deku and Katsumi would basically go over to Katsumi's room as they actually begin to talk about things. This is when Deku and Katsumi would basically just have a little bit of an awkward silence, and Deku would tell her that he's gonna basically go home. And she'd be like, yeah, and Deku would basically swing home, just kind of bright red, not knowing what to do. This is when the very next day would arrive and the heroes versus villains thing would actually happen. This is when Deku and Katsumi would actually spend the entire day leading up to the heroes versus villains training thing, talking to each other, and everything would have been a little, you know, just average. Until All Might busts in through the door saying, I am here, walking in like a normal person. As everybody would be like, All Might! Now this is when All Might would introduce them to their hero suits, as well as telling them about hero training. This is when everybody would be like, awesome! And when everybody would come out with their suit, Deku would come out looking like Miles Morales. As some of the people would say, you're that kid who interned with, I guess you could say you were trained by Spider-Man. As Deku would say, yeah, that's me. As everybody would be like, whoa, that's awesome. Now, this is when Katsumi and Deku would actually get teamed up together against Todoroki and Uraraka. Now, in terms of that match, Deku and Katsumi would basically be the heroes, as Katsumi and Ida would actually be the villains. Now, as soon as the match starts, Katsumi would immediately blow up into the air. She begins to look through. Sorry, I'm stumbling all over the place. She would look through all the windows, searching for where the bomb is. When she finds it, she would tell Deku to climb up it. As Deku jumps up into the air and begins to climb up the building. This is when Deku would turn invisible and say, stay out here. As Deku would turn invisible, and he would tell Katsumi to bust in through the door. As she would proceed to actually be like, screw it, and bust in straight through the wall. Ida, as well as Uraraka, would get on guard as Deku sneaks in through the window, and he would begin to go over it, become uninvisible, and touch the bomb, making the heroes win. This is when it would be announced the hero team won, as Uraraka and Ida would actually be extremely confused, wondering how the hell they won, because they didn't see Deku do anything. As Deku would turn uninvisible and he would basically say, hey, as they'd be like, you could become invisible? As Hagarukiri, the invisible girl, would be like, wow! As Deku would be like, yeah. And this is when they would basically go to, you know, rate everybody's thing, as they would all say that Deku basically was the MVP since he turned invisible and won the match for them as easy as it gets. Now, this is when Deku and Katsumi would basically Katsumi would basically go to Deku's house and have a little bit of dinner over there, as they would basically just chill, watch movies, and the day would end. Very next day would come around, and this is when they would actually be told about the USJ. As soon as they're told about it, Deku and Katsumi would actually get very excited, you know, thinking, oh, rescue training, not bad. As Deku would be like, more of this. This has always been so boring. As they would basically all arrive to the USJ. Now, as soon as they're about to walk in, Deku would tell Aizawa to stop. And Aizawa would be like, what do you mean stop? As Deku would say, I have spider senses. I guess you could say it's like a sensation that lets me know whether danger's coming or not. As Aizawa was just like, huh. And Deku tells him that he feels a lot of danger coming from inside there. As Aizawa tells him that there's nobody but Hero 13 in there. As Deku says no, he feels like there's more people in there. As Deku tells Aizawa to call for backup. This is when Aizawa would proceed to actually call for the backup, just like Deku said, trusting his gut, you know, trusting what Deku's saying, because, you know, Deku may be a student, but he did train under the hero Spider-Man, and I mean, he has to have a lot more experience than all of these kids and know a little bit of what he's talking about. After all, he saw what he did in the heroes versus villains, and he knows exactly how to handle the situation. This is when the heroes would arrive, and Deku, Aizawa, as well as all of the heroes that had arrived previously with All Might, would basically bust in, and all of the students would basically wait outside as Deku begins to turn invisible and walk right in with the heroes. Now, this is when This is when everybody would begin to take out all of the low tier villains. They would basically take care of them in about 2 minutes. Now, after this is when Shigaraki would say, "Damn it! How did the heroes know that we were coming?" As Shigaraki would look straight at Spider-Man and say, looks like we got that Spider Brat's child. As Shigaraki basically tells the gnome who to attack straight at Spider-Man. Or no. Yeah, he would tell him to attack, basically go straight after Deku. As Deku would basically have a spider sense telling him to dodge. And now, as Deku would dodge the Nomu's attack, as All Might would come in immediately, coming in to back up Deku. As Deku as well as All Might begin to get into a very fierce fight with the Nomu. As soon as they get started, Deku and All Might would proceed to press the Nomu, as Deku has about 70% of One For All strength, and I believe that's what All Might's at now, since he's been taken back. I don't think he has 100%, but I definitely can't say that I'd say that All Might's strength is about 70%, so with All Might and Deku both being there, that would be more than enough. Now, All Might and Deku would proceed to basically toy around with the Nomu, as they realize that the Nomu just heals. I mean, what are they doing? If they just keep if they keep doing this, then the Nomu's just gonna get up. And Shigaraki says that he has regeneration and shock absorption. As Deku says, but does he have electricity absorption? As he begins to turn invisible, jump on the Nomu's head, as he says, 1,000 bolts. No. He says 7,000 bolts as he shoots an immense charge of electricity straight into the Nomu's brain, making the Nomu's brain explode. And as soon as Shigaraki sees this, he says, "Kurogiri, get me out of here." As Kurogiri takes Shigaraki out of there, and All Might and Deku basically smile at each other as they had basically taken down the Nomu. This is when Deku, as well as all the heroes, would basically look at Deku as they are like, "Why did you come in, kid?" As All Might basically tells all the heroes to back down, as if Deku wasn't there, that fight may have gone a little different, with all the heroes basically acknowledging what All Might had said and taking his word for it, thanking Deku and telling him that they're sorry, that just not to do that next time. As Deku would tell them that he's sorry, but it's just one of his instincts to take down the villains. They all basically proceed to have a little bit of grins on themselves and just kind of know that Deku has lots and lots of potential. Now, this is when Deku Katsumi would basically go home, with her telling him that it was pretty badass how he basically just jumped into action with everybody else just staying back. As Deku would say that, it was pretty cool. As Katsumi and Deku would have a little bit of a flirting going on at this point, as a little bit of that would have been established. Now, this is when they would actually be told that they're going to just be having a 1 week break, as Katsumi and Deku would basically use that time to just hang out. Now, Deku would actually hang out at Katsumi's houses. They're in Katsumi's room just watching a couple of movies just like usual, and suddenly Deku asks Katsumi how she feels about him, as Katsumi would go bright red and Deku would just be like, "Come on, please tell me that you feel the same." As she would tell him that she's gonna tell him that she just needs a little bit of time to tell him. As Deku and Katsumi basically just end off the entire week just hanging out together every single day, as well as training a little bit together. They gotta train a little bit. And this is when they would arrive straight at class the very next day, as they're told that they're gonna have the UA Sports Festival the very next day. Now, when they're informed about that, Deku would go up to Katsumi right after they're told that, and Deku would ask her that if he wins, she needs to tell him how he feels about her. And she would say, "Okay, but if I win, you have to tell me how you feel about me." As Deku and Katsumi would basically just grin, as they're both thinking that they're gonna win, but Deku's like, I'm gonna win this thing. You don't know what you just signed up for. As Katsumi's just not really paying much attention to it, thinking that she'll be fine. Now, this is when Deku would proceed to basically just train during that night, just do a little bit of push-ups, a little bit of calisthenics, as, it helps a little bit. He does very, very, very high reps, because he's strong as shit, so, extremely high reps, 1,000 everything. Now he does 2,000 of everything. You already know, my boy Deku ripped. Now, anyways, this is when we're going to go ahead and get into the UA Sports Festival. In terms of who's giving the speech, we all know Izuku's going to do it. I'm not going to give the speech. I'm sorry. I'm not going to say anything just because I suck. I absolutely am horrible at giving inspirational speeches. So let's just say that Deku says something very inspirational. What do you guys think that Peter Parker would say? He'd say something along those lines, and everybody would get extremely hyped up for the battles, as Izuku was seen as the number one prospect, the number one, person to win, as everybody or most people actually know who he is. He's actually definitely developed a name for himself already, being known on the news as the kid who helped the heroes take down the League of Villains. As he has a little bit of weight behind his name at this point. Now Peter Parker would actually call him before the first thing starts, meaning the race, and he would tell him to show the world that he's here, and show the world that he's gonna be even better than what he is. As Deku smiles and tell him definitely. Now this is when the race starts, and Todoroki would shoot his ice, as Deku would use his web to basically shoot up into the air and shoot way past it. This one Katsumi would use One For All to blast off into the air, blasting off way in front of Todoroki and Deku. And Deku would proceed to take advantage of this, using his web slinging abilities to shoot a web right at her leg, pulling himself way in front of her as he goes off flying. And he basically just winks at her before he flies past her, as Katsumi basically loses her momentum and she almost falls onto the ground, as she basically picks up the speed. And it's Deku, as that kind of angered her, and Deku's like, oh crap. He would proceed to basically use nothing but his speed at this point, and Deku would decide that his webs can only get him so far. Now this is when Deku would go on foot and go all out. He would begin to absolutely sprint towards the finish line at 70% One For All speed. Not that he has One For All, but he would go all out, and this is when Deku would absolutely blitz over there. He would just not. He would blitz over there and get first place. Katsumi second, Todoroki third, and that's going to be the order. Now, this is when the cavalry battle begins next. In terms of the cavalry battle, Deku would actually get teamed up with Ida and Uraraka. Ida because he has no real problem against Deku or thinks of him as a rival at all. He would think of Deku as an opportunity to learn it. He would basically, ask if he could be on his team. And Uraraka, just being the nice girl that she is, would actually just go up to Deku and ask if she could be on his team. Katsumi would get a little jealous admittedly by this, and she'd be like, oh, so you want another girl on your team? As Deku's like, it's not like that. As she's like, whatever. Now, they would do the race. Uraraka would proceed to make everybody weightless, as Ida and Deku are actually using their speed to maneuver around everywhere, as Katsumi basically uses her explosions to blast people away, if anything. Todoroki would be the only one who really has the balls to go towards them, as all of the other teams would basically not really want to go up against them. As the match would start, and Todoroki's team would immediately rush at Deku, as Deku's just sitting there like, well, let's get started. This is when Deku and Katsumi would basically run around, as Katsumi's shooting explosions everywhere, keeping Todoroki away, shooting a lot of AP shots at his direction, and having Todoroki have to basically dodge very, very swiftly so he doesn't get hit by them. He would rush at them, shooting a giant iceberg at them, as Deku would use his wings to swing on top of it. And Uraraka, using her weightless ability, would make it super easy for Deku to, be able to swing them all up there. This is when Ida would actually tell them that he only has one chance at this, at the move that he has, and he can use it at the last minute, and Deku would tell him that he doesn't actually need him to use it, as Deku basically just uses his spider senses to help the team dodge all of the other attacks, as Todoroki tries to use his ice, and his ice is everything that he has at the moment, since he still has his little daddy issues, and Todoroki uses nothing but his ice, as Deku tells them to use his he uses his spider senses to dodge everything. And when he tries to trap them into one little thing, Deku would just use his webs to swing right out of there. And Katsumi would explode the ice walls that he would create to trap them in. As Deku's team would end up getting first place, with Todoroki giving up halfway and deciding to go after other teams and getting second place. And the rest of the people who basically made it into the battles would basically pass, because I don't feel like getting into why. So, first match would be announced: Deku versus Shinzo. Now, this is when Deku would get straight into the battle, and as soon as he walks in, he would basically have his spider senses being weary of this guy. He would not know why, but Shinzo would begin to talk smack on Deku, telling him that it must be great to have such an amazing quirk, to have everything handed to you, and to be seen as such an amazing guy. As Deku just doesn't answer, since he thinks that there's something up with this guy, as he's seen quirks like this before. As Deku's has experience. He has 1 year of experience in his bag. As Deco just proceeds to shoot webs at Shinso's mouth. As Shinso just can't talk anymore. And this is when Deco would proceed to be like, should have kept your mouth shut. As he swings webs at him and kicks him straight into the wall, creating a small crater. As Shinso gets knocked out and the next match is announced. Now, before the next match gets started, Todoroki would walk up to Deku as he tells him that he's going to beat him using only half of his power. As Deku says that that's not the way to think about things. You can't go about things using only half-assing things. You have to give it your all. It's disrespectful to me and all of your other opponents if you just use ice, as Todoroki just scoffs at the thought and says, whatever, I'll defeat you anyways. Now, this one Deku versus Todoroki would be announced, and as soon as Deku sees Todoroki, he decides that he's going to change Todoroki's way. The entire match, Deku would just be toying with Todoroki, trying to force him to use his ice, as Todoroki finally snaps and uses it, as Deku says, see, was it that so hard? As Todoroki realizes that he activated his fire, and he would proceed to be like, no, I can't use my quirk. This one Todoroki would explain his backstory, I guess you could say, and he would have the same little thing that he did in canon in terms of using his little, his little ice and fire attack on Deku. But Deku would decide that, okay, if he's going to do that, then he is going to use something like that himself. He would charge up a giant blast of electricity to go straight at Todoroki as he would charge it up. And as soon as Todoroki goes straight at him, Deku would jump at him, surrounding himself with a thick cloak of lightning, speeding himself up by 2 times, and would immediately blitz Todoroki as he gets behind him and punches him straight into the wall, creating a giant crater. This one Todoroki would get eliminated as Deku was announced the winner, and the final match would be announced. Deku versus Katsuno. Before the match starts, Deku and Katsumi would look at each other and say, remember, if I win, you tell me how you feel about me. As Deku says, too bad that you're going to be the one who tells me, as she tells him the same, and the match would get started. In almost an instant, Deku would shoot webs at her eyes as she's blinded. And before she even notices, Deku would punch her straight out of the arena as she goes flying and doesn't really get too hurt. As Deku then basically, it's announced that he basically won the entire match. As he runs up to her outside of the arena and asks her if she's okay. She would basically be like, ow! As Deku says, sorry, I didn't think you would want me to go easy on you. She says, I wouldn't have, but I guess now I have to tell you. As she would begin to turn red, as Deku would look right at her and she would tell him, you want me to tell you how I feel about you? This is how I feel about you. As she would pull him in for a kiss on live television. As Deku and Katsumi would basically have the relationship established at that moment, and the crowd would go wild, be like, whoa, Katsumi and Deku sitting on a tree, KISSING, all that little stuff. Oh my god. Comment down below Katsumi and Deku sitting on a tree if you made it this far. Anyways, this is when Deku would proceed to basically just be happy, as Katsumi and Deku end up going back to one of their places and just chilling, basically making out the entire time. Now, the very next day would arrive, and this is when they would be told to pick their hero names, as Deku knows immediately what he's going to pick. Spider-Man, Peter Parker Peter had already given him, the chance to use the name, since he knows that he's going to retire soon. He's getting kind of old, and Deku would know this, thinking that he's going to be an even greater hero than him. As everybody in the class is wondering why he picked that name, and Deku would tell them that, he entrusted him to live out his legacy, to, be an even better Spider-Man than he was, as the class would understand. And Deku would actually pick to internship over with Spider-Man. I'm definitely going to give you guys one. I know in the training, I was a little fast-paced with it, and I didn't really give too much of a development, but we're going to have that here. Also, in terms of the little stain side of things, I'm going to go ahead and do that one now. That one's, we all know how that goes down. Come on now. I'm going to give you guys something different. So I'm going to just blow by that real quick. In terms of that, Katsumi would actually end up going with Gran Torino because All Might requested it. She would go over there. She would find Gran Torino laying in a pool of ketchup, as she would be like, get up. As he would be like, you're no fun. Now, she would actually end up training in nothing but combat, as she already knows full cowling, and she would basically proceed to get her ass beat the entire time. This is when they would go on the train, and Katsumi and Torino would basically get ambushed by the gnome. When suddenly Katsumi would end up actually flying out with Torino, using her explosions to propel herself after him. When suddenly she notices Ida and Stain in the alleyway, but this time she was actually too late. By this time, Stain had already stabbed his blade into Ida's spine, paralyzing him from the waist down. And was about to kill him as Katsumi lands and shoots a giant explosion and sting. She would proceed to take him out pushing herself to the limit, having to use about 30% of one for all. Yeah, no. Having to use about 25% of one for all, pushing herself to the absolute limit, and would actually end up beating him. In terms of staying, getting back up, and getting passed out due to the ribs, that actually ends up happening just like in canon, and Endeavor ends up taking the credit. Now, let's go to the interesting stuff. As soon as Deku gets that, he flies out to America as he goes to New York, and during this time, the Green Goblin actually would have been causing a little bit of trouble in New York City, as he had actually recently escaped from prison. Now, this is when Deku would be like, Green Goblin, huh? As Peter Parker would basically tell him that, yep, he's back. As Deku would be like, well, let's go take care of this. As Parker's just like, I wouldn't, definitely. Now, they would both proceed to swing through the city as everybody's like, he's back. As everybody's like, basically like, hey, Deku's back, because everybody knows his name, or Izuku's back, as everybody's just happy to see Izuku back with Spider-Man, since, it had become a little bit more of a Batman and Robin type of thing, where he was kind of a sidekick, and everybody had known Deku for, being an amazing hero. Some saying that he was actually already better than Spider-Man. Now, this is when Deku would actually be flying through the skies. Out of nowhere, he would get shot by a orange ball that would explode on him, sending him flying, crashing down to the ground. This is when he would get up and be like, damn Gob, as Goblin would start laughing maniacally, as Deku would say, yeah, I missed you too, as the Goblin would proceed to throw balls at, pause, no homo, as he would proceed to throw the little orbs at Deku that basically catch Deku off guard. And this is when Spider-Man would come in out of nowhere, kicking him right off of it, as Deku jumps up into the air and electrifies the Green Goblin, knocking him out as the Green Goblin basically passes out. And that's that in terms of the Green Goblin situation. After this, immediately, actually, let me look up a couple Spider-Man villains. I don't know who I'm going to use this next, but no, I'm definitely going to give you guys about 3 villains that Deku's going to take out during this entire time. Come on now. We gotta do this thing right. Come on now. Now, I like this. All right. Okay. Yup. Now, this is when they would actually take Green Goblin to the authorities. Very next day would come around, and this is actually the first day that he was there. He spends the entire first day, just training with Spider-Man a little bit, doing a little bit of patrols, and taking out the Green Goblin. Next day would come around, and this is when Sandman would actually be causing a lot of destruction through the city. Yes, sir, I'm giving you guys Sandman. Now, Sandman would be doing a lot of destruction during the city, as Deku and Spider-Man are just like, how did he escape? As Spider-Man's just like, well, I guess we gotta get him back. Now, this is when Deku and Parker would proceed to basically just swing through the city until they arrived there. Now, Sandman would proceed to create a hammer and start beating on Spider-Man as Deku would arrive right behind him, catching off guard. But when he would kick Sandman, he would kick straight through him. Now, Sandman would be like, you've already tried that before, remember? As Deku would have a flashback to once upon a time when he tried that before, and it didn't end too well. This is when Deku would say, well, things have changed now. As he basically, as Peter Parker and Deku basically proceed to get slapped around a little bit, because Sandman is actually very, very hard to take out. Sandman would proceed to use his giant fist with the spikes on it to basically whack around Spider-Man and Miles, I guess you could say, since he has his powers. I'm just going to be calling him Deku. As Deku. Now, this is when Deku and Parker would proceed to basically just, fight off, Sandman, as Deku gets an amazing idea. He decides that he's going to use water to make his sand harder to control, as Deku basically tells Spider-Man to, help him lure him out to one of the giant water towers. Now, as soon as Sandman gets close, Deku ends up, basically using his loud mouth to basically get Sandman's attention and force him to follow him as he's going in to attack Deku, as Deku kicks down the tower, and the tower drops lots of water on Sandman, as Sandman turns into mushy sand, as it gets hard for him to control his abilities, as he basically turns back into his normal state, as Spider-Man and Deku end up capturing him for good. Now, they would put him away back into prison, and almost as if on cue, you would hear a loud roar as Venom would bust in and Spider-Man would basically say, Deku, get out of here now, as Deku would proceed to basically jump out of the way as Spider-Man basically begins to take on Venom. It'd be one of your classic fights with Spidey actually being on the losing end. And after watching this for about a minute, Deku would think that enough is enough, as he would jump in immediately, throwing a giant punch at Venom as Venom would use his webs to basically catch Deku's hand into the air and fling him to a building, as Deku would barely catch himself. He would jump back at Venom as he coats himself in the armor of electricity, you could say, and he begins to blitz around Venom, with Venom being very confused, not knowing where Deku's at, as Deku uses his large voltage of electricity to basically catch on Deku and catch on Venom and hold him tightly, as he then says, have 7,000 bolts, as he begins to shock Venom, as Venom just screeches like, ah! as Deku proceeds to basically take out Venom almost instantly. Now the symbiote would basically get angered by this. Spikes would come out of him as Deku senses this and jumps away, barely on time. Now his leg would have actually gotten stabbed by the symbiote, as Deku's in pain, and Spider-Man uses this ability to capitalize and turn on one of his sonar waves that he has on his suit now. He blasts a large concentrated amount of sound at Venom, as the symbiote begins to screech in pain as it's feeling an extreme amount of pain and get off of Eddie Brock, as they basically end up catching the symbiote, and that's that in terms of the Venom situation. That's gonna mark the conclusion to the little Deku and Spider-Man reunion, and afterwards Deku and Parker would proceed to go get a bite to eat after a good day's of work. They would talk about things, and Peter would basically congratulate Deku for his improvements, and he would begin to tell him that he definitely can see that he has actually gotten much stronger. Deku would tell him that he would thank him for it, and he would basically tell Parker that he'll have to be going now. They'd basically hug, and Deku would say his goodbyes as he has to leave. And Deku would proceed to just be talking to Parker as they're just chilling. Now, this is when Deku would proceed to arrive back, as he sees Katsumi, and she's a little bit injured, a little bit of scratches on her, as he asks, what happened? As she tells him that, she ended up taking out the villain Stain, and Deku's like, you took out Stain on your own? As she'd be like, sure did, as Deku's like, wow. Now, this is when Katsumi and Deku would basically be in class, as Deku and Katsumi would basically be like, well, you want to see who's better in the race? As she would say, last time we did a race, it wasn't so good for me. As Deku would begin to just laugh and say, yeah, I guess so. As, they would have a little bit of fun about it. As Deku would proceed to, just look at Katsumi as they're just talking for a little bit of time. Now, this is when Deku would, just proceed to save All Might in terms of the little race that they did to get back to assess where they're at. And afterwards, Deku and Katsumi would go off to Deku's place as his mom wouldn't be home, and we all know what this means. He gonna get the... Okay, I've been trolling way too much this entire episode, boys. I'm having way too much fun with this little Miles Morales thing. Anyways, now, this is when Deku would proceed to, have an amazing time with Katsumi, as, he's having a little bit of fun, I think he deserves it. He helped take down Goblin, he helped take down Sandman as well as Venom. Come on now, he deserves it. Now, this is when, they would basically just be laying down as Inko gets home. Now, Inko opens the door and she's like, Izuku, I'm home. As she begins to walk up to Deku's room, and he's like, oh crap. Now, that's where I'm going to be leaving it off, guys. If you guys want to find out what ends up happening next, make sure to go show some love to my boy Izukage. He has the second part in his channel. It's going to be ending the entire series. So if you guys end up liking, me, and if you just came here from Izukage's channel, make sure, you subscribe, turn on those post notifications, and, go check out Izukage, as, me and him are, pretty much rivals in terms of subscribers, Me and him are always neck and neck in terms of, who got the most subscribers, like, let's drop better what ifs, like, we're boosting each other, And he's actually one of my very, very close what if friends. So if you guys could, go to his channel, check out the second part, and, let him know that you came from me, let him know that I, told you guys to go over there. But yeah, with that being said, I hope you guys very much enjoyed the what if. But that being said, Zether
out.